You're sitting there, watching the screen. The market is moving, not dramatically, just enough to create that familiar tension in your chest. You know your setup. You've defined it clearly. You've written down the criteria, but what you're looking at right now isn't quite it. It's close enough that part of your mind is starting to negotiate. Close enough that you can feel your hand hovering near the mouse. Close enough that you're already imagining the trade working out, already calculating potential profit, already feeling that pull to just get in. And then there's this other voice, quieter, the one that says, wait. This isn't your setup. This isn't what you planned for. But that voice feels weak compared to the urgency building in your body. The market is moving. Other people are probably in this trade right now. If you don't act, you might miss it, and missing it feels, in this moment, worse than being wrong. So, you click, you enter, and the second you do, something shifts. The clarity you had before the trade disappears. Now you're just hoping it works, hoping you didn't just make another impulsive decision, hoping that this time, close enough will actually be enough. This isn't a video about patience as a virtue. It's about understanding what's actually happening inside you when you can't wait, when you know you should hold back but you take the trade anyway, when you break your own rules not because you don't understand them, but because something in you finds waiting unbearable. And if you can understand what that something is, if you can see it clearly, you might finally be able to do what every successful trader eventually learns to do. You might be able to wait. The psychology behind waiting for the right trade is more complex than most people realize. On the surface, it seems simple. You have criteria. You wait until those criteria are met. You take the trade. What's complicated about that? But anyone who's actually tried to do this consistently knows it's not simple at all, because waiting isn't a passive activity. It's an active psychological state that requires you to manage something most people aren't even aware of. It requires you to manage the discomfort of inaction, while opportunity seems to be moving without you. Let me start by describing what waiting actually feels like, because I think most traders don't fully recognize the experience they're having. When you're waiting for your setup, you're not just sitting there, neutrally observing the market. You're in a state of tension. Part of you is alert, scanning for your opportunity. Part of you is restless, wanting to do something, to take action, to participate. And part of you is afraid you'll miss the move. Afraid you're being too strict with your rules, afraid that other traders are making money while you're just watching. This combination of alertness, restlessness, and fear creates a very specific kind of discomfort. It's not painful exactly, but it's not comfortable either. It's the feeling of being on the edge of something without being in it. And your mind, which is designed to move you away from discomfort, starts looking for ways to resolve this state. And the most obvious way to resolve it is to take a trade, any trade, because being in a position, even a questionable position, feels better than the tension of waiting. This is the first thing you need to understand about the psychology of waiting. The discomfort you feel while waiting isn't telling you that you should take a trade. It's just discomfort. It's your mind's natural response to a state of high alertness without action. But most traders interpret this discomfort as a signal. They think it means something. They think it means they should act, and so they do. They take trades that don't quite meet their criteria, not because they've suddenly decided their criteria don't matter, but because the discomfort of waiting has become too intense to tolerate. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Different traders experience different flavors of this discomfort, and understanding your specific flavor is important. For some traders, waiting feels like FOMO, fear of missing out. They watch the market move and they imagine everyone else capturing that move while they sit on the sidelines. They feel left behind, excluded, like they're not really trading if they're not in a position. And this feeling is so uncomfortable that they'll take marginal setups just to feel included in what's happening. For other traders, waiting feels like boredom. And boredom, for these traders, is intolerable. They came too. Trading for excitement, for engagement, for the feeling of being actively involved in something dynamic. And waiting, by definition, is none of those things. So they take trades to generate stimulation, not because they believe in the trades, but because doing something, anything, feels better than doing nothing. For still other traders, waiting feels like weakness. They have an image of themselves as decisive, as action-oriented, as someone who seizes opportunities. And waiting feels passive. It feels like hesitation, like they're not being the trader they want to be. So they take trades to prove to themselves that they're bold, that they're aggressive, that they're not sitting on the sidelines out of fear. Even though the reality is that waiting is often the bravest thing a trader can do. And then there are traders for whom waiting feels like doubt. When they're not in a position, they start questioning everything. Their strategy, their ability to recognize setups, their decision-making. The absence of action creates space for self-doubt to creep in. And taking a trade, even a marginal one, temporarily silences that doubt. It makes them feel like they know what they're doing, like they're capable, like they're a real trader, until the trade goes wrong and the doubt comes back even stronger. Whatever your specific flavor of discomfort is, the pattern is the same. You experience discomfort while waiting. You misinterpret that discomfort as a signal to act. You take a trade that doesn't quite meet your criteria, and then you deal with the consequences of that decision. Sometimes you get lucky and the trade works, and that reinforces the pattern, teaching your brain that taking marginal setups to escape discomfort is acceptable. But more often, the trade doesn't work, and you're left with the frustration of knowing you broke your own rules again. What makes this pattern so difficult to break is that it happens very quickly. The discomfort arises, your mind generates a justification for taking the trade, and you act. Often in the span of seconds, there's not much space between the feeling and the action. And without space, there's no opportunity for conscious choice. You're just reacting to discomfort by trying to escape it. And the escape route is always the same. Take a trade. Get into a position. Do something. So the real psychological work of learning to wait, is about creating space between the discomfort and the action. It's about noticing the feeling when it arises and recognizing it for what it is. Not a signal that you should trade, but just your mind's discomfort with inaction. And once you can recognize it, once you can name it, you create a gap. In that gap, you have a choice. You can respond to the discomfort in the usual way, by taking a marginal trade. Or you can choose to stay in the discomfort, to tolerate it, to wait for what you're actually looking for. This might sound simple, but it's not easy. Because tolerating discomfort goes against your brain's basic programming. Your brain wants comfort. It wants certainty. It wants action that resolves tension. And waiting for the right trade is, by nature, uncertain. You don't know when your setup will appear. You don't know if it will appear today at all. You're in a state of not knowing, and that state is uncomfortable. So, your brain keeps generating thoughts designed to get you out of that state. The thoughts sound reasonable. They sound like trading logic. Maybe the market conditions have changed and I need to adjust my criteria. Maybe I'm being too rigid. Maybe this setup is good enough. Maybe I'm overthinking this. These thoughts aren't random. They're strategic. Your mind is trying to give You permission to do what will make you feel better in the short term, which is to take the trade. And if you're not aware of what's happening, if you think these thoughts are genuine insights rather than discomfort management strategies, you'll follow them. You'll adjust your criteria in the moment. You'll convince yourself it's okay, and you'll take the trade. The traders who learn to wait are the ones who recognize this pattern. They know their mind will generate justifications when the discomfort of waiting becomes intense. And instead of treating those justifications as truth, they treat them as information that they're uncomfortable, information that their discipline is being tested, information that this is the moment where most traders fail, and if they can hold steady here, they'll be different from most traders. Let me tell you what actually happens when you learn to wait properly. At first, it feels impossible. The discomfort is overwhelming. Every fiber of you wants to take the trade. But you don't. You sit with it. You feel it fully? The tension, the restlessness, the fear of missing out, whatever your particular discomfort is. You feel it in your body. You notice your breathing change. You notice your jaw clench. You notice your mind racing through scenarios. And here's what's remarkable. The discomfort doesn't destroy you. It doesn't even last that long. It peaks. It sits there for a while, and then it subsides. And when it subsides, you're still there. Still waiting, still watching, still ready for your actual setup. And something in you learns a very important lesson. You learn that you can feel discomfort without needing to escape it. You learn that waiting, while uncomfortable, is survivable. And more than survivable, it's actually the path to trading well. Because here's what most traders don't realize until they experience it. When you wait for the right trade, when you actually let your setup come to you instead of forcing marginal entries, the quality of your trading changes completely. Your entries are cleaner. Your confidence in the trade is higher. Your ability to hold the position is stronger. Everything is easier because you're trading from a place of alignment, rather than from a place of discomfort management. Think about the difference between these two scenarios. In the first scenario, you take a trade because you can't stand waiting anymore. You're in a state of tension and urgency when you click. The trade doesn't quite meet your criteria, but you've convinced yourself it's close enough. And the moment you're in the position, you start second-guessing. Did I just mess up again? Is this really a good trade? You're managing doubt from the very beginning, and that doubt affects everything. It makes you exit to early. It makes you move your stop. It makes you unable to trust the process because you know you didn't follow the process. In the second scenario, you wait. You feel the discomfort. You let trades that are almost right pass by. You stay patient, and then your actual setup appears. The one you defined, the one you've been waiting for. And when you take that trade, you're in a completely different psychological state. You're calm. You're confident. Not because you know it will win, but because you know you did what you were supposed to do. You followed your system, and that confidence allows you to manage the trade properly. You can hold through normal fluctuations. You can take your profit at your target. You can take your loss at your stop. You're not fighting yourself because you're aligned with your own rules. The difference between these two scenarios isn't just about better entries, though that matters. It's about the psychological experience of trading. One feels like a battle. The other feels like execution, and which one you experience depends entirely on your ability to wait. Now, let's go deeper into why waiting is so difficult. I think it has to do with how we're wired as humans. We're not naturally designed for the kind of waiting that trading requires. In most areas of life, action is rewarded. If you see an opportunity, you take it. If you want something, you go after it. Hesitation is often seen as weakness. Overthinking is seen as a problem. We're taught to be proactive, to make things happen, to take initiative. But trading is different. In trading, excessive action is usually punished. Forcing trades is punished. Acting from impatience is punished. The market doesn't reward you for doing something. It rewards you for doing the right thing at the right time. And sometimes, often actually, the right thing is to do nothing, to wait, to let the wrong opportunities pass by so you're available when the right opportunity appears. This goes against our instincts. It feels counterintuitive. And that's why so many traders struggle with it. They're trying to apply an action-oriented mindset to a situation that requires selective action. They're trying to prove their competence through activity when real competence in trading often looks like inactivity, like someone who's watching, waiting, patient, and only occasionally acting. There's also something cultural about this. We live in a world that glorifies busyness, that equates activity with productivity, that makes you feel like if you're not doing something, you're wasting time, and trading, when done properly, involves a lot of time where you're not doing anything visible. You're watching, you're waiting, and that can feel, especially to someone who's achievement-oriented, like you're not really working, like you're not really trying. But waiting is work. It's psychological work. It's the work of managing your own impulses, your own discomfort, your own need for stimulation and validation. It's the work of staying present and alert, without acting. It's the work of trusting your system enough to let it operate on its own timeline rather than forcing it to operate on yours, and this work is invisible. Nobody watching you would know you're doing anything. But inside, you're doing everything that matters. I want to talk about what happens over time when you practice waiting. Because it's not just about individual trades. It's about what you're training yourself to become. Every time you wait when you want to act, every time you let a marginal setup pass by, every time you choose alignment with your rules over relief from discomfort, you're building something. You're building the capacity to delay gratification. You're building self-trust. You're building discipline that's not based on willpower, but on understanding. And these qualities compound. The first time you successfully wait through intense discomfort, it's hard, extremely hard. But the second time, it's slightly easier because you have a reference point. You remember that you survived it last time. You remember that the discomfort passed. The third time, easier, still. Not because the discomfort goes away. It doesn't, but because your relationship with the discomfort changes. You stop seeing it as something that needs to be fixed immediately and start seeing it as something that's part of the process. But let's be honest about something. There will always be trades you miss, always, even when you're perfectly patient. Even when you wait for your exact setup, there will be moves that happen while you're waiting, moves you didn't catch because you were being disciplined. And this bothers traders. It creates a persistent low-level anxiety that maybe their rules are too strict. Maybe they're being too selective. Maybe they're missing too much. This is where you need to understand something fundamental. You cannot catch every move. It's impossible. The market moves constantly in ways that don't align with your particular strategy. And that's okay. That's not a flaw in your approach. That's just reality. Your job isn't to catch every move. Your job is to catch the moves that match your edge. And to do that, you have to let all the other moves pass by. The trades you miss while waiting, those aren't losses. They're not opportunities you failed to capture. They're trades that were never yours to begin with. They didn't meet your criteria. They weren't part of your system. And taking them, just to avoid the feeling of missing out, would have introduced randomness into your approach, would have diluted your edge, would have made your results less predictable, and your psychology more chaotic. There's another aspect of waiting that we need to address. Sometimes waiting feels difficult not because of FOMO or boredom, but because of a deeper insecurity. An insecurity about whether you actually know what you're doing, whether your criteria are correct, whether your strategy works, and as long as you're waiting, as long as you're not taking trades, you don't have to face the possibility that your approach might be flawed. So there's this tension. You want to trade to prove to yourself that you can, that your system works, that you're capable, but you also know that trading before your setup appears is breaking your rules. So you're stuck between the need for validation and the need for discipline. And often, the need for validation wins. You take a trade, not because it's right, but because you need to know. You need to feel like a trader. You need evidence that you're not just sitting here wasting time. This is where you have to separate your need for validation from your commitment to your process. Your process doesn't care about your insecurities. It doesn't care whether you feel confident today or doubtful. It just is. It has criteria, and those criteria will either be met or they won't. And your job is to execute when they are and wait when they aren't. That's it. That's the entire job. If you need validation, find it somewhere else. Find it in your ability to wait when waiting is hard. Find it in your consistency in following your rules. Find it in the fact that you're doing something most traders can't do, which is exercising real selectivity. But don't look for validation in the act of taking trades, because trading for validation is just another form of emotional trading. And emotional trading, no matter what emotion is driving it, is the enemy of consistent results. This is the mindset you're working toward. Not a mindset where waiting is easy. It might never be truly easy, but a mindset where waiting is accepted, where it's seen as a necessary and valuable part of trading. Well, where you understand that the patience you're exercising ain't wasting time, it's creating the conditions for quality trades, and quality trades, taken consistently, are what create consistent results. I want to address one more thing before we finish. There's a difference between waiting for the right trade and waiting paralyzed by fear. Some traders convince themselves they're being patient when really they're just afraid to pull the trigger. They see their setup appear perfectly aligned with their criteria, and they still don't take it. They find reasons to hesitate. They overthink. They let genuine opportunities pass by, not because of discipline, but because of fear. This is important to distinguish. Waiting for the right trade means you're alert, ready, and decisive when your criteria are met. You're not in the trade until they are, but the moment they are, you execute without hesitation. That's discipline. But if you're seeing your setup and still not trading, if you're creating additional criteria in the moment to avoid the discomfort of risk, that's not discipline, that's fear disguised as patience. And the way to know the difference is to look at your rules honestly. When a setup appears that meets all your criteria, all of them, and you still don't take it, you're not being patient. You're being afraid. And that's a different problem that requires different work. Work around accepting risk, around trusting your system, around being willing to be wrong. But if you're taking trades that don't meet your criteria, if you're jumping in early or forcing marginal setups, then your problem is the one we've been discussing. The inability to wait, the discomfort with inaction. And the solution is learning to recognize that discomfort, to sit with it, to let it be there without needing to fix it by taking a trade. So as we come to the end of this conversation, I want you to think about your own experience with waiting. What does it feel like for you? Is it FOMO? Boredom? I need to prove something? Self-doubt? Whatever it is, that feeling is the thing you need to learn to work with. Not eliminate, not overcome, just work with. Just recognize when it's showing up and making you want to break your rules. Because the psychology behind waiting for the right trade isn't complicated. It's just uncomfortable, and most traders never learn to separate discomfort from danger. They feel discomfort while waiting and they interpret it as a signal that something is wrong, that they need to act, that staying in this state is somehow harmful, but it's not harmful. It's just uncomfortable, and if you can learn to tolerate that discomfort, if you can learn to wait through it, you'll have access to something most traders never develop. You'll have the ability to be truly selective. Waiting is the skill that allows all your other skills to work. It's the foundation, and it's not built through trying harder or being tougher. It's built through understanding what happens inside you when you can't wait, recognizing the discomfort for what it is, and choosing to stay with your process anyway, not once, but again and again, until waiting stops being a battle you're fighting and starts being something you just do, part of who you are as a trader. Someone who waits, someone who's selective, someone who honors their edge by only trading when conditions are right. That's the psychology behind waiting for the right trade. It's the work of managing your own discomfort, so it doesn't manage you. The work of recognizing when your mind is trying to escape tension rather than execute your plan. The work of staying aligned with your rules when alignment feels harder than action. And if you can do that work, if you can learn to wait, not perfectly but consistently, everything else in your trading becomes possible. Because you'll finally be trading your system instead of trading your emotions. And that difference, that simple but profound difference, is what separates the traders who make it from the ones who don't. Thanks for staying with me through this. If something here landed for you, let me know in the comments. And if you want more conversations like this, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.